Hi, I'm TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast, and I ask that you like, share, and comment on this video. Thanks for watching. All I gotta say is, who dat? Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you all so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. Shouts out to everybody that's tuning in right now, no matter where you are, wherever you may be, as I get my backpack out of the way. There we go. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Shouts out to everybody. If this is your first time watching the State of the Saints podcast, hopefully it won't be your last. I'm really excited about this, man. I'm really excited about what we're about to do here on the State of the Saints podcast. Today is the start of a 8-part series. That's right, a 8-part series leading up to the NFL draft. We're going to break down every last pick for the New Orleans Saints. We know that the Saints have 8 picks in this year's NFL draft, so we're going to go by each and every round. Today, we're going to start with round number 1, and we're going to go all the way to pick number 257 in the 7th round. So if you're new here, you're in for a treat because we're going to be talking about this, and I'm extremely excited about that. Once again, I have to mention we're still raising money for the Rolling Fork Relief Fund. I'm asking those that want to donate to the State of the Saints podcast. I really appreciate that. But there's a link in the description of the YouTube channel. You click on the link. If you were going to donate to the show, just take that and donate towards the Rolling Fork Relief Fund. You can easily just put your comments down in the in the comment section, and we'll still read that. But for those that want to donate, I'm asking that you donate that to the Rolling Fork Relief Fund. I really appreciate that. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about round number 1. We know that the New Orleans Saints have the 29th pick in the NFL draft this year. The Saints acquired this because of the trade with the Denver Broncos for the right to Sean Payton as the new head coach of the Denver Broncos. So the Saints got the 29th pick that has been stepped on, rolled over, and everybody didn't had. I think the Dolphins didn't had it, the 49ers didn't had it. I mean, the Broncos didn't had it. I think everybody didn't had it. But I'm just joking, man. Look, anytime you get a first round pick, it's a really good pick because there are some really talented players that come through the first round. The first 32 normally. In this case, it's going to be 31 because of the Dolphins forfeiting their pick because of tampering back about the whole Sean Payton, Tom Brady thing. But normally you have 32 picks, and those 32 picks are for 32 of the top players, that's playing college football. The New Orleans Saints have done some things that kind of made me change the way that I'm looking at the first round. We knew that they needed some help. A lot of us thought that they were probably going to go in the direction of an interior lineman. Some of us still feel that way. Some of us feel like, the Saints can use some help on the offensive line, especially at the guard positions, since we've seen the offensive line get kind of dinged up. Guys like Andrews Pete in and out of the lineup. And so many guys have been, kind of like plug and play. So I really did some evaluating. I've tried to do drafts depending on Saints news, Saints acquiring guys, bringing guys in. I've been trying to, do the drafts based on that. So I've been changing around the first round picks for quite some time. But as of right now, and I'm only saying this as of right now, I got a pick that I feel like the Saints, would be really good for the New Orleans Saints. But before I get to that, head coach Dennis Allen, he spoke with the media at the owners meeting that took place in Arizona, and he was talking about doing their due diligence to find the right guy to be a part of the Saints organization.
Look, we utilize our coaches out on the road a lot in terms of going out and spending time with these prospects because you don't really know what you have until you actually get them in your building. And so the more time you can spend with them prior to that, the better your odds are. So there's a margin for failure in any time you're bringing in a player, a coach, or whatever. And all we're really trying to do is minimize that margin for failure. And so the more time that you can spend with these players, the more you minimize that.
So that would explain why Dennis Allen and the Saints organization are out here, talking with guys, going to dinner with guys, trying to figure out what they can actually have if they were to draft some of these players. And I have no problem with that. I know some of us are a little bit confused. We feel like, why are they taking this guy out when their need in the first round mostly focuses on this position? But I got to give them credit because the Saints want to make sure that they got the right guy with the right makeup that could add something to this team. And I think that's extremely important. And also, I got to give Dennis Allen some credit in this regard, man. Dennis Allen, I've been noticing, like, some of the press conferences, especially this one right here, it seems like, he's a little bit more sure and more confident in himself and what the Saints are doing going forward. And I think it has a lot to do with him this offseason really putting his stamp on the team, really making this his team. And you can tell in the delivery and the confidence that took place at that press conference on yesterday, if you're watching this on a Wednesday. But, it's so important that you make the right decision. I kind of cut off the conversation, but Dennis Allen really alluded to making the right decision, making sure that you bring the right guy in. And a lot of teams, they get these guys that have this upside and this ability, but they haven't really done their due diligence to the fullest extent. And then you find yourself having buyer's remorse. But there's some really talented guys in this draft, especially like if you're trying to find help on the defensive line. I think that you can find that almost as early as the first round, as late as the fifth or the sixth round. You still can find somebody that can be able to contribute in a major way. Rather is, it may not be the guy that's going to get double-digit sacks, but can be a really good run stuffer, or a guy that can probably give you 5 or 6 sacks that can be a part of your rotation. This is a really talented group of defensive linemen, and they are really true athletes, man. Having the opportunity to go to the NFL Combine and be able to look and see these guys in action, I mean, it really shows you how athletic and talented these guys are, and you can understand why, like, some of these scouts out here, they fall in love with these guys, because you get an opportunity to learn more about these guys. You see their personality, you see them work on the field, You see the athletic ability that they show. So I can understand how a person or a scout can fall in love with some of these players. But it's about making the right decision. And, as I look at the first round, when I first looked at the first round for the New Orleans Saints, I think I was in agreement with a majority of Saints fans when I say that the Saints should go after the defensive tackle. Guys like Kalijah Kancey, guys like Sika Ika, like guys like that, right? Big guys, that can move, super athletic, especially guys like Kalijah Kancey. But the more I look at it, the more I realize that the New Orleans Saints need to get that guy opposite of Cam Jordan, the guy that can go out there, that can give you those double-digit sacks, because I feel like we eventually are going to be taking Cam Jordan for granted, and it's almost getting to that point. Cam Jordan has been extremely productive. He has won the battle of attrition. He doesn't miss games. He goes out there and he competes, and he shows that true leadership, and he deserves to be the undisputed captain of the New Orleans Saints. But I just think that sometimes, because of his durability, because of his talent, I think that sometimes it can be taken for granted. And I think that by him being so talented, the Saints felt, well, we can try to take a flyer on this guy, like a Davenport, who's super athletic, that can move. And, if things work out, then we can really have a monster. But, in the meantime, Cam can go out here and get his 10 sacks, can get his 10, 15 sacks, and we should be okay while the young bull is trying to develop. And the same way with Peyton Turner. I think they did the same thing. I think what the Saints need to do, once again, is to get that guy opposite of Cam Jordan. And that is why I feel like in the first round, the Saints should do everything that they can to acquire Nolan Smith from Georgia. Nolan Smith, I mean, he is an outside linebacker, but, he is an edge rusher. This guy is 6'2", 235 pounds. Some people would say that he's undersized, but look, I've been talking about this for I don't know how long. There's a new breed of pass rush in the National Football League, and they almost come in the size in the build of a Nolan Smith. You're seeing it with the TJ Watts. You're seeing it with the Bosa brothers. You're seeing it. I'm pretty sure that Nolan Smith, they'll probably have him gain, a little bit of muscle, maybe a couple pounds of muscle. But to me, I feel like this guy would be the answer to the Saints' problem. The Davenport issue with the Saints trying to draft Davenport, hoping that he can be the successor to Cam Jordan. The same thing with Peyton Turner. I feel like the Saints need to do everything that they possibly can to acquire Nolan Smith. Now, it's going to be tough because Nolan Smith falls into that top 10, top 15 category, right? And if you look at some of the draft order, you look at some of these teams, and I'm just going to call it out. I'm just going to name the first 15 picks. You got the Carolina Panthers, you got Houston, you got Arizona, you got Seattle, you got Detroit, Las Vegas, Atlanta, Chicago. You have Philly, Tennessee, Houston, Jets, the Patriots, and you got the Green Bay Packers. So to me, Nolan Smith can easily, if I'm looking at this, I can see him going 15 to the Green Bay Packers. So the Saints, in my opinion, they're probably going to have to move up to try to acquire a guy like Nolan Smith. So where you go? Like where you go and who can you possibly trade up with? In my opinion, I think the Saints can maybe jump in front of the Green Bay Packers to acquire Nolan Smith if they were to make a phone call to the New England Patriots. Now, we all know the New England Patriots, they like to gather up draft picks. They always been that way. It's very rare that you see the New England Patriots stay in one particular spot. They're open for business all the time. And we've seen, how jumping in front of a team can change the fortune of your franchise. For example, the Kansas City Chiefs jumped in front of the New Orleans Saints back in 2017 to acquire Patrick Mahomes. And the Saints, I mean, they won also, because they got Marshawn Lattimore, a guy, in my opinion, is the best cornerback in Saints history. That's just my opinion. But sometimes you got to be a little bit aggressive. So if the Saints can possibly find a way to maybe move up to that 14th spot to get themselves a guy like Nolan Smith, I think that would be a good fit for him. Now, I'm seeing some people in the chat talking about Kalijah Kancey, which I can understand that. And shouts out to my guy, Ross Jackson. Really been lobbying for him and Jackson, Smith and Jigba. You know, and Jigba Smith, excuse me. But I understand Kalijah Kancey and the comparison to Aaron Donald. And I think that he's going to be a really great athlete, a really great football player in the right situation. But the Saints need guys that can rush the quarterback. They need to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. This has been an issue, in my opinion, since I say about 3 or 4 years, where the Saints start off a little bit too cold and then things start to warm up. The preheat oven defensive line is not going to do it. You got to hit the ground running. And I think a guy like Nolan Smith, a guy who motor stays hot, a guy that can be a matchup problem for a lot of offensive linemen in the league, especially those guys in the NFC South. I think that he can be the guy that can finally replace, the contributions of Cam Jordan once Cam Jordan decides to move on and hang up the cleats or what have you. So the Saints, it is time for them to try to move forward, maybe getting a guy like Nolan Smith. Now, as far as Kalijah Kancey, for all those people that mention him, I just feel like the more he starts to work out, the more footage is out about him, the more he shows that he's a freakish athlete, it's going to make him more and more appealing. And this guy, to me, went from being, maybe in a top 20, 25, maybe in that range, because of his talent, because of his skill, the way that he performed at the combine, he moved himself up into the top 13. So you got to be asking yourself, like, can the Saints be able to even move up to that particular position, top 10, top 12, in order to acquire a guy like Kalijah Kancey? And I don't think so. I just think that this guy is going to be gone before you know it because of all the things that we're seeing. If the Saints could acquire a guy like Kancey, that would be great. But I just think that it is very, very important for them to be able to have a guy that can rush the quarterback. And we can all talk about potential, but I just think that potential is fine. But you want a guy that you think or you consider as a sure thing. With Peyton Turner, you're hoping that he finally reaches like his full potential as a defensive end. But in the meantime, you can get yourself a guy that can rush the quarterback and that can do a multifaceted of things like Nolan Smith. Add him to your defense. The guy is a super freakish athlete. He's fast, he's strong, and he definitely can give you what you need when it comes to getting pressure on the quarterback. So that would be my round 1 pick as of right now, would be Nolan Smith, the edge rusher out of Georgia. Didn't play in a national championship game, of course, had some injuries, but performed at the combine, performed at Georgia's pro day. I like him a lot, and I think that he is the answer to the Saints' defensive line issues, and I think he'll be the problem solver, if you ask me. Go ahead and read some of your comments, and then we'll go on for that. Let's see. Slim South says yes to Nolan Smith. The smaller guys get to the quarterback faster. Yeah, Angela, and that's something that I've been noticing. And it's not a knock on none of these larger guys, the guys that are 6'4", 6'5". You still got some guys out here that can get home. But it's just that hybrid edge rusher, that guy that can dip a little bit lower, that has that extra little, quick step, that can get around that offensive lineman to cause problems for that offensive lineman, and it caused problems for the quarterback. Like, what can you do? Like, what can you do if your quarterback, let's just say, for example, if he runs like a 4.5, 4.6, but the guy that's chasing him running like a 4.3? Like, so you have a guy that can rush the quarterback and can give you that double-digit sacks consistently. That's why you see guys like Micah Parsons. That's why you see guys like T.J. Watt. That's why you see guys like the Bosa brothers, Khalil Mack. If you want to go back a little bit further, it's a new breed of edge rusher in the league right now. And like I said, it doesn't mean that there's not room for those big tall guys with good wingspan that may weight between the range of 275 to 280. But I think that you need to come into the modern day NFL and get guys, that fit that mold. You look at Caden Ellis, right? Caden Ellis kind of fit that mold. He had a really good season, got himself paid in Atlanta. So I don't think that this is just a coincidence or an outlier. Like, this seems like this is the new wave of the NFL. And I think that the New Orleans Saints, from what I've seen, like from what I'm seeing right now, it seems like the New Orleans Saints are open to change. And that's something that I think that we need to have an appreciation for, because I think our biggest concern as Saints fans was the Saints wallowing in the world of complacency, right? Like, not, looking and trying to see what's going on in the league and trying to adapt to it, right? But we're seeing that the New Orleans Saints are trying to get better. They're trying to find more athletic guys that can move. They can be a little bit on the larger side if you're talking about guys like Colin Saunders, a large guy, but can move really good. And Nathan Shepard is as well. So it seems like the Saints are trying to get faster on the defensive line. So how do you get even more faster? You draft one of these hybrid defensive ends, like a Nolan Smith, like a Van Ness, like some of these other guys out here, Ed McDonald, guys like that. That's how you get faster. Maybe if you don't go after Nolan Smith, maybe it's some of those guys in the later rounds, like Isaiah Land out of FAMU, probably would be there in the 4th or the 5th round. So those are the type of mold. That's the type of mold the new edge rushers are in right now. They're not the larger guys, but they're smaller, but they're strong, they're fast, they're physical, and it's hard for these 300-pound offensive linemen to put hands on them. So I think the Saints might end up trying to go that route. I don't know. Would be interesting to see. TJ, I was talking to Deuce about Nolan, and he like him as an athlete, but think he's not a scheme fit for the what DA likes to do. Do you share that thought process? I feel like this, man. I think that sometimes, when you have guys that are in college, if they have like a certain scheme, I think sometimes, we just think all of a sudden like, oh, that's just who they are. But sometimes, it's that scheme. My question would be, can he adapt? Like can he, fit that mode? And I just think that when you look at a guy like Nolan Smith, who's, to me, can he be what Caden Ellis, was? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, could he do that? Like, while Caden Ellis was getting pressure on the quarterbacks? Absolutely. I do feel like if you put him in the Saints uniform, I think that you definitely, he definitely can get pressure on the quarterback. I think that, to me, I think the Saints kind of robbed themselves out of production, because they have guys that fit a certain mold, but they don't utilize them the right way. They try to change them sometime into being something. Like for example, Zach Bond. Like, Zach Bond at Wisconsin was a hand on the ground linebacker rushing the quarterback. When he got to the New Orleans Saints, they didn't use him like that. Like, they had him on the weak side, had him chasing down guys, and I just think that that's one of the main reasons why, a lot of Saints fans soured on Zach Bond. The question would be, like, let's just say if the Saints utilize Zach Bond the way that Wisconsin used him, like, would Zach Bond be looked at a little bit differently as he is today? I think with Nolan Smith, maybe that's one of those situations where, he might look a certain way, but give him an opportunity. I think that, him rushing the quarterback, him being able to get pressure on the quarterback is something that the Saints actually need. Now, if we're talking about coverage and all that kind of stuff there, I don't know, but I think that if you, with his skill set, his athletic ability, the way that he plays the game, I think you can find a play for him. I think that there's more to Nolan Smith than meets the eye. I think that, being at the University of Georgia, I think that, maybe they had him doing like a certain thing, but I don't think that's what he's limited to. I think that, if you get him, I think he can do exactly what you want him to do and even more. So I have to say, man, I would like to see Nolan Smith in the Saints uniform. And I think that with Dennis Allen, I think that Dennis Allen is smart enough to try to find, something for him. And, and I think that he can find something that makes it work. It's almost like, with Tyrann Mathieu, like earlier in the season, Tyrann Mathieu was asked to be a little bit of box safety doing what Malcolm Jenkins was doing. But as time went on, it just seemed like DA and a group hit the reset button and they started to do stuff that, that kind of fit the mode of Tyrann Mathieu, and we seen better production later on in the season. So I just think that if they look at him, they'll find a place for him. And if they find that place, I think he's going to be a really dominant defensive player. But I mean, I can see why he feels the way he do, but I just think there's more than meets the eye when it comes to Nolan Smith. Let's see. No apologies needed, brother. You had to let out your frustrations. I don't know exactly what we're talking about there. Can we trade up without giving up a first next year? Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for you to be able to trade up without giving up a first, next year. But if you do give up a first, and look, we only get mad at losing first round draft picks and losing guys if it don't pan out. Like if it pans out and it works out in the favor, nobody cares. Like nobody cares about, like, honestly, if the Saints would have went to the playoffs, nobody would have cared about the 10th pick in the draft. Nobody cares. It's just the optics of it all. It's the way that it looks. Like it seems like the Saints thought that they were going to be something that they wasn't, and they end up, playing an entire season only for them to give the Philadelphia Eagles a 10th pick in the draft. We only are concerned about this because it didn't work out. But if it did work out, we wouldn't be saying anything. So if you know that you have a sure thing, like let's just say, for example, if the Saints make a deal with the New England Patriots to move up to 14 and they acquire Nolan Smith and Nolan Smith wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. Like, will we care about a first round pick? No, we wouldn't. But if the Saints were to move up to 14 and get Nolan Smith and he ends up getting hurt, then all of a sudden, like, we'll look at the organization like that's the dumbest move ever. Hindsight is 20/20. I don't care about the Saints moving up or losing a first round pick if that means the guy that they're acquiring can be a cornerstone player for the next 5 to 10 years. Who cares about that? We only care when things don't go our way and all of a sudden, like, it's just the biggest thing in the world and we're upset and we're ticked off at this. But look, I have no problem with that. Like, that's just the break sometimes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And also, here's the reality. Just because you get a first round draft pick and you keep them, don't mean that player that you draft is going to end up being that cornerstone player that you want either. Like, we look at these first round picks, like gold, which we should, but it's a gamble regardless. It's a gamble if you give up your first round pick for the following year. And it's also a gamble if you keep them and draft somebody. You have to hope that person pans out. You got to hope that they win a battle of attrition. You got to hope that they're everything that your scouting department thought that they were. So I just think that, you can't just look at situation and be like, well, look what happened last year, it didn't pan out. Well, that's not what teams that try to go for it do. What they do is they try to do the best thing possible to win now, right? Not, and sometimes, like I said, if you can get a guy and that guy ends up being everything that you want him to be, then, it works out. But sometimes it doesn't. Miles Murphy would be nice. Yeah, Miles Murphy, is pretty good. He's definitely, coming up quite a bit. Like he's a guy that, people have really been talking about. And the Saints, if I'm not mistaken, has talked to him, and I don't know if they had dinner or not. I can't remember, but they definitely have been talking with him. They like his athletic ability. So, he's definitely a really good, player, and he might be one of those guys that be there for the New Orleans Saints if they were to stay at number 29. I agree 100%. You can tell something was up. Yeah. Let me go ahead and scroll down a little bit. I agree, TJ, 100% less. The Saints are trying to get better. That's true, TJ. Well said. Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about getting better. It's all about improving. And that's what the Saints have been doing. Like, I feel like this. Like, I know we all have our opinions about Dennis Allen, the way season went last year. Can he win? But to be honest with you, I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Dennis Allen. Like, believe it or not, like it seems like the New Orleans Saints are being what we want them to be. They're being aggressive. They're not really taking no for an answer. And I really feel like Dennis Allen believes now deep down that this is his team. And it has a lot to do with the fact that he's bringing in his coaches. He's bringing in his players. It seems like, it's his. And you can tell in the confidence, the way that he's talking about players. It seems like he's more dialed in, and not to say that he wasn't last year. I think that he really wanted to succeed. Don't get me wrong, but I just think that when you're basically just kind of just plugged and played, that's kind of what it was. Like, everybody stayed the same, but here comes Dennis Allen, and I often use the example. It's almost like you've been working alongside somebody, on the sales floor or in the warehouse or in the distribution center, for like 8 years. And then all of a sudden the boss comes in and points that guy and says, you're going to be all these people boss. I mean, y'all done sit down and ate tuna sandwiches together. Y'all done sit down, and talked about football together. And then now all of a sudden, now this person is about to walk up in the room, in the break room, and now the room is going to get quiet, right? It doesn't make any, like, it's hard for a person to really accept that. Now, you can respect that, but at the same time, you have it's just human nature, right? When a person gets promoted, you've been working alongside that person. You kind of know where the bodies are buried. You kind of know that person's limitations. You know if that person like off on the side somewhere while everybody else is working. Like, you kind of know these things, and then now all of a sudden, like, this guy is telling me to work hard. Like, this guy is, or this woman is telling me that, my breaks only can be 15 minutes. Like, it's kind of hard to accept that. But when you eliminate that, and let's just say you hit the reset button and you're bringing in people that respect you because, number one, you hired them, and number two, you giving them an opportunity to show what they can actually do to improve their portfolio to possibly be in that position. So it's a little bit different. And, a lot of guys probably felt some type of way about it. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they respect him as a coach, but it's just human nature, man. Like, man, I can be a head coach. I believe I can be a head coach. I can coach the heck out of this team. If you ever played football or been around football, man, there's a lot of, like, if you lack confidence in a world of football, you're not going to last very long. And when you have a group full of individuals that are very confident in their ability, so much so that they feel like if their name is called to coach anybody, they can do it. You got a lot of egos there. So, yeah, but I'm glad that Dennis Allen, it seems like, he's really much sure about himself. Like, I'm really big on body language. I'm really big on eye contact. I'm really big on that stuff. And I pay attention to those type of things in interviews and press conferences, because you can honestly tell, it can tell you an entire story. If the Saints trade up maybe a starting left tackle and move Trevor Penning to left guard, he would be a good guard. He is more a run blocker than a pass blocker. Yeah, I mentioned that before. I wouldn't be mad at the Saints moving him from the outside to the inside. And I even used that, I even mentioned that myself. But when I look at, like, a lot of the things that I felt was because of the Saints' commitment. I questioned the commitment to Andrus Peat. But now that you kind of revise Andrus' contract and you know that Andrus is going to be there, I think that the Saints are looking for him to start. And I think that the Saints probably, I'm not going to say 100% confidently, but they probably won't look for offensive line in the first round because they have Andrus Peat and they feel like they have their guys for the offensive line. So maybe like in some of those later rounds, if the right guy is there, maybe they'll have an offensive lineman come in for depth purposes to be a part of the offensive line. But I think when you look at the first round, and you look at these players, you have to believe that the Saints want to go with somebody that's going to be a starter or get a significant amount of playing time. And if you get an offensive lineman in the first round, I mean, is there a full guarantee that he's going to get full playing time without somebody being hurt? So there you go right there. And you also will find yourself in a difficult situation because if you draft a guy, right, and let's just say he's, supposed to play guard. I mean, if he's really good, then you're finding yourself, making a tough decision like, okay, what am I going to do with this other guy? And I think that if you feel like you got some stability or, some stability on the offensive line, you feel like you can go further with this guy and you feel like this guy can be what you need him to be, then why, draft another guy. But my stance about moving Penning from left tackle to guard had a lot to do with the fact that I questioned the Saints' commitment to Andrus Peat. But now we see that they have commitment to him at least throughout 2023. I think the Saints can go in a different direction when it comes to drafting another player at another position, but who knows? We don't need to draft pass rushers who came from small schools anymore. Look, I don't think it has anything to do with coming from a small school. I just think that, like, I have no problem with guys coming from small schools getting drafted. Like, those guys can turn into Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who came from Tennessee State. Those guys can turn into Khalil Mack, who came from Buffalo, right? Those guys, can be that. I have no problem with that. But I feel like if you're going to draft a guy, you cannot take a gamble on a guy just based off potential. Like, if he has a history of being hurt throughout college, chances are he's going to get injured in the pros, right? You can't just get enamored with the physical traits of the guy and just completely just disown the fact that the guy has been injured the majority of his his collegiate career, right? No disrespect to Peyton Turner. I've seen some flashes, but he has had a history of being injured, right? Like Davenport, has been injured. So the chances are those guys are going to end up being injured in the pros. And you can't just fall in love with the long wingspan or athletic ability because, yeah, they'll have it on the field, but if a guy is constantly hurt, who is going to see it, right? It's the whole tree falls in the woods thing, right? Does it really make a sound? Like, if this guy has all this athletic ability, but he's never on the field, does it really matter? It really doesn't. So I don't have an issue with them drafting from a small school because, once again, it's not about where the guy comes from, right? It's about, the measurables, the durability, all those things need to be taken into account, right? So that's the way I look at it. It has nothing to do with the school they come from, but everything to do with, everything that's behind the scenes. The Ellis Bond types are more like Nick Herbig or Yazir Abdullah, meaning we can get a 3-4 edge type, but only if they have upside to play off ball too. Look, I feel like this, like the Saints aren't just a one-dimensional team when it comes to scheme. The Saints play some of everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, play a little nickel, play a little dime. Like you see some 3-4 packages, some 4-3 packages. The Saints they adapt, right? So to say that you can't find a place for a guy like Zach Bond, I just think that wouldn't be the right thing to believe. I think that if you were to use him like that, I think that maybe his career would be a little bit better. I kind of feel bad for Zach Bond because I wonder to myself, like, how good is he really? Like, would this be like one of those situations where at the end of this season, Zach Bond goes somewhere else that has like a 3-4 scheme majority, or he gets the opportunity to put his hand on the ground? Like, would he be a matchup problem? Would it be difficult for offensive linemen to contain him? So it's kind of hard for me to just look at him and be like, this guy stinks. right? But if you've been following this guy since college, you know that the way that they've been asking him to do certain things, that just kind of hasn't been his thing. He's kind of just been that outside linebacker that rushes the quarterback that gets home more often than not. So, sometimes, like I said, it might have something to do with, what they're asking you to do. And, their commitment to trying to make you into what they want you to be versus what you actually are. And can you do it? Tyrone, thank you very much for the $5. Says, I want us to get a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a wide receiver, running back, offensive line. And agreed, I see the same thing about DA. Tyrone, thank you very much for the $5. I really do appreciate it. Look, I think that the Saints need all these things that you said, and I think we all are in agreement. I don't think we really care that much when it comes to the order. I think that we just want them to address those things. And I will say this, the New Orleans Saints, they aren't trying to be difficult. They're not trying to leave you guessing. Like it is an open book right now. What the New Orleans Saints need, they are going after. The Saints felt like they needed a quarterback to play the position and have more stability. They went out and got it. They allowed guys like Ayamada and Shai Tuttle to go. They even allowed Malcolm Rose to go out there and test the market. And they brought in Saunders and Shepard, to try to go ahead and replace those guys. They brought in safeties, guys that can play that box safety role. Okay, Tyrann Mathieu, we want him to play a little bit more of, guarding the slot receivers or the tight ends. Okay, that's your thing. That's what you've been doing. Fine. So we're going to bring in guys like Jonathan Abram and Lonnie Johnson, guys that can serve as box safeties. So the Saints aren't making this difficult. What you're looking at is a team that is being extremely, extremely simplistic, and it is easy to understand. And I expect for the NFL draft to look the same way. The only difference is I think that based on what I'm seeing, all the reports, it just seems like they are really doing their homework. And you got to give them credit. You got to give them credit, man. Like, I know that the morale was extremely low at the end of the 2022 season, right? I mean, the disgusting performance by the Panthers, Sam Darnold only throwing for 40-plus yards. It was a bad taste in the mouth of the Who Dat Nation, right? A lot of mouthwash, you know what I'm saying? A lot of Dr. Tishner, was being rinsed in the mouths of the Who Dat Nation. But they have really done a good job to instill confidence in each and every one of us that the season that we're embarking on can be something that's very, very positive. And if the Saints play their cards right and they do some of the things that maybe got them beat last year to correct those, then, they can be there in the end. The NFC is wide open. And there's no world beaters out there. We talk about the 49ers and the Eagles, but we saw that the Saints have the ability to beat the Eagles, even though Jalen Hurts didn't play. You still had I say maybe 80, 90% of that team that was there. I want to say Jordan Davis didn't play. Jalen Hurts didn't play, but you still had Miles Sanders out there. You still had Dallas Goedert out there. You still had guys that were a part of that team that were very instrumental in their playoff run. So to say that the New Orleans Saints are just that far back to a point where if they were just to play Philly, it would just be a complete obliteration. Well, complete destruction, I should say. They'll get absolutely obliterated, by the whole situation. So I don't see the Saints just being absolutely destroyed by any team in the NFC. That includes like some of the teams that they look at and be like, the Saints are just absolutely get destroyed. I haven't seen that team. Any team that the New Orleans Saints have played, for the most part, no matter how good they are, they've been in a game, right? They played teams that won 10-plus games and they were losing by, a field goal, or some unfortunate circumstance. So to say that, oh man, they're gonna get completely destroyed, like I don't believe that. Let's see. Thank you for the $2. Justin says, I want Nolan Smith. Doubt it happens though. Well, look, here's the thing. I think that we need to completely eliminate that whole thought of, oh man, it ain't gonna happen. Because I think what happened is, as Saints fans, we have grown accustomed to Sean Paytonisms and the way that the Saints operate. And I just think that if we want to be 100% real, I think that I think all these guys, have a level of confidence within themselves. But I think that Sean Payton's confidence sometimes could, it kind of trumps what the Saints actually need. I think Sean Payton knows that the Saints would need something, right? But he ain't about to go out here and kiss the proverbial behind of the player, right? He gonna let them know, oh man, we want you here, you're good, we got this going for you. And if the guy be like, you know what I'm saying, maybe they felt like they needed a little bit more love. But it seemed like with Dennis Allen seemed like he can hype you up. Like, we need you up in this thing. Like, we excited to have you. This is what we want to do with you. We know for a fact that we can go all the way with you. Look, we need you here. You ain't going to find another team or a more established organization or a more stable organization than the Saints. He's willing to go the extra mile, and he's willing to, at times, be probably a little bit more humble, in my opinion. Like, I think with Sean Payton, will give you that impression that, he wants you to be there, but not like to a point where it's just like, oh, we really need you here. And I think that's something with Dennis Allen, because I don't feel like I'm wrong by saying that, because you can really see in the demeanor, you can really see the way that, Michael Thomas talks about Dennis Allen. When the Saints played the Falcons and Michael Thomas went to the podium for a press conference, you can really tell that he wants to succeed for Dennis Allen. I think that Michael Thomas probably respects Sean Payton. I think that, I think that he respected how Sean Payton can put him in a position to succeed. But I really feel like there was a disconnect. But it just seemed like with Dennis Allen, is more closer to Michael Thomas, and he's willing to allow guys to be themselves, and he also really put emphasis on the importance of those guys being there. And I think that's one of the main reasons why, if you look at guys coming into the building, to be honest, how many guys since Dennis Allen has been the head coach has come into the Saints facility and left without a contract? Guys that they really want. Derek Carr went into the facility, and, it was a little bit of a process, but eventually he got the contract. Tyrann Mathieu, same way. Jarvis Landry, same way. Foster Monroe, it was going to be the same way. Unfortunately, the situation with Hopkins lymphoma. So Dennis Allen is a heck of a recruiter. You got to give him credit for that. So those guys have come into the organization, come into the building, and he has sold these guys on the potential of the New Orleans Saints. So you got to give him credit for that. And I think that's the thing that it got going for him. Will McDonald is the next best option than Nolan Smith. I say Ed McDonald. Who the heck is Ed McDonald? But anyway, yeah, Will McDonald, my bad, out of Iowa State. I say Ed McDonald. I get Ed McDonald. But anyway, yeah, Will McDonald, the edge rusher out of Iowa State, yeah, he definitely would be, the next. But, he's that guy that's probably going to fall into some of the late rounds, could possibly, depends on how the draft pans out, might fall into the second round. And if he does, man, then somebody's going to get a top, to me, this guy's like a top 15 pick. He got that type of ability. So if he was to fall to the second round, somebody is going to get a really good football player. So let's see. You can never go wrong by picking in the trenches early. After Philly versus Kansas City Super Bowl, expect other teams to copycat and reach on offensive line this year. Could be a run on those guys early. So if we want O-line round 1 or 2, that's a good point. Scout without clout. That's a good point. You can never go wrong with offensive linemen. I think the biggest issue is that people just, they just kind of roll their eyes, Scout, because it's the offensive lineman position. Unless they do something ridiculous that garners a flag, nobody really pays attention to the offensive line. Every now and then, the all 22 will come out, shouts out to Nick Underhill, shouts out to Deuce Winham, shouts out to us, all those that kind of, put that stuff out there on social media for people to see. But you might every now and then see an offensive lineman mauling somebody and get a couple likes and retweets. But for the most part, it's a boring position in other people's eyes, even though to me, that's probably one of the toughest positions to play, if you want to be honest, but it's a position nobody really pays attention to. We pay attention mostly to the skill positions, the quarterback, the running back, the wide receivers, the cornerbacks. Those are what we pay attention to mostly. And the offensive linemen kind of slide through the cracks. So when at number 29, the Saints pick offensive lineman, we rolling our eyes because we want to see, that player all the time and have that player be the focal point. But sometimes, man, you got to go what people may consider as boring, even though this is not me saying that. I'm just saying what most people may feel about the offensive lineman. But to me, if you need an offensive lineman, I say you get an offensive lineman. And it doesn't matter, what people think at the end of the day. It's about contributing. And besides injured, Peyton Turner was never worth first-round pick, and Davenport, I honestly thought he would have been a first-round, just not top 15 pick. Well, look, hindsight is 2020 once again. The athletic ability, the skill set of Davenport, I can understand why the Saints tried to make that decision. They made that decision, I should say. I'm not mad at the decision. Like I said, hindsight is 2020. We only feel this way because it didn't work out. It wasn't a bad decision. It wasn't a bad decision to go after a guy with his athletic ability and his skill set. There was nothing wrong with it. It just didn't pan out the way that we wanted. If Marcus Davenport would have been wreaking havoc year in, year out, we would have not cared. It didn't work out. So it feels like it's the worst decision in the world. But I'm not mad at it. It's like going to Vegas, right? You go to Vegas, you got a couple $100 in your pocket, right? You put some on the crap table, you put some on the roulette table, you put some, in the slots. You might end up walking out with way more money than what you came in there with. Or you might be making a phone call, asking somebody to send you some money for a plane ticket back home. That's just how it works. But I'm not mad at the decision. It just didn't work out, right? But if it did work out, we wouldn't be having this type of energy at all. And we have to be mindful of that, man. A lot of our decisions are based on, what things didn't turn out to be. And we have to understand it. Do you think the Saints are going to go wide receiver in round number 1? I'm going to be honest with you, Charles. This is a very unconventional New Orleans Saints front office. So I don't know. We have grown accustomed to the Peytonisms. So when we say stuff like, the Saints aren't going to get this, the Saints aren't going to get that, we're looking at it from the lenses of a Sean Payton type lens, right? We're looking through Sean Payton lenses. But this is a different coaching staff. This is a different coach. And the collaboration between the philosophies of Dennis Allen and the philosophies of Mickey Loomis, you might see some things that are kind of different. So I honestly don't know if they will get a wide receiver in round number 1. I don't. I think that if a guy they feel like could be a good complementary to Michael Thomas, to Chris Olave, and he's there like a Jackson and Jigba Smith, somebody like that, then I think that, why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, why not grab a guy like Smith and Jigba? Why wouldn't you want to do something like that? I don't know, but regardless, if a guy's there and they feel like it is a good player, then why not? My problem with picking Davenport is we passed on Lamar Jackson for him. That's, like I said, at the end of the day, it's hindsight is 2020. Like, I'm all for that, and I'm agree with you, because once again, when the Saints moved up, I thought that they were going to get Lamar Jackson. I thought I'll never forget where I was at. Once again, 2018, I was at Planet Fitness. I was in the middle of some reps, and I seen the Saints jumped up. I stopped what I'm doing. I was looking at the screen on the wall, and when they drafted Davenport, I was in shock, right? I was just like you. But once again, I understand why they drafted Davenport. Number one, they were looking for somebody to be opposite of Cam Jordan. Number two, he had the athletic ability and the skill set to be a problem for offensive linemen. It just did not pan out. And it makes it look even worse that Lamar Jackson went to Baltimore, won league MVP, and won more regular season games in the first 4 years of their career than anybody else. So it just looks bad. But let's just say, for example, Lamar Jackson won league MVP. Lamar Jackson, won all these games, but Marcus Davenport was always in a conversation as one of the top edge rushers in all of football. We would not have cared, right? We would have been happy for Lamar Jackson, but at the same time, this is our guy. Like, for example, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, like we say, oh man, what would have happened if the Saints would have got Patrick Mahomes? But nobody is upset that the Saints drafted Marshawn Lattimore because we all like Lattimore and we know that he's a shutdown corner and we see how he plays and we see how dominant he is at that position more times than not. So is anybody really mad at the Saints drafting Marshawn Lattimore over Patrick Mahomes? No. But if Marshawn Lattimore was out there getting smoked like brisket, burnt like a biscuit, then it would have hurt a little bit more. But when you have a guy with all-pro talent, multi-time Pro Bowler, and a guy who is extremely important to the way your team plays defense, can't really get mad at that, so to me, it's only because one guy didn't live up to the hype and the other guy did. I must have got a delayed notification. How long you been on live? I've been on for 56 minutes. 56 minutes, Saint. It's probably because I changed the time a couple of times. I was trying to create the little, I won't say a soundbite, but create the little clip of Dennis Allen. So it took a little bit more time for me to do the edit and for it to process. So I had to push back the time. And sometimes when you change the time, it sometimes don't send notifications out to everybody. So I do apologize for that, but thank you for being here. If we got him, we trade Troutman, though. So it all depends on how they think he's developing. Well, look, I think with Adam Troutman, I think he showed some improvement last year, but we seen the game. I want to say what was against the Bengals, and he was going in motion. All of a sudden, he just collapsed. So I think that with that injury, he was injured throughout the entire season. So I think that you have to take that into account. But he played pretty good. He played pretty good until that injury happened. And when he did get injured, this is the thing, folks. This is what you have to pay attention to and you have to respect. When he went down, the Saints had to change a lot of things about that offense and the way that they actually, did certain things offensively. It's kind of like when Josh Hill was injured in the NFC Championship game. I think Sean Payton, if I'm not mistaken, Sean Payton said it eliminated like 40 to 50 plays that was in their offensive playbook. So Adam Troutman's skill set and ability and him not being available or him not being able to be out there, at 100% capacity and take the majority of the snaps, it can take away some of the things that you can do offensively because maybe the next guy that comes in that can replace him is not as good at doing that than Adam Troutman is. So you got to give him credit for that. I love Darnell Washington, too. Best blocking tight end I ever graded. He'll be literally perfect next to Penning and would act as nearly an extra offensive lineman. He's very strong and unique. Yeah, I had the opportunity to talk to Darnell Washington at the Combine, man. I talked to him, really good guy, man, very physically imposing, very sure of himself. And, I think that he kind of fell and slid between the cracks because, and I mentioned this on Twitter, I think Brock Bowers had a lot to do with that. I think that's the main reason why people aren't really giving Big O that much attention is because Brock Bowers, the sophomore out at Georgia, now going to be a junior, was so dominant. Like this guy is supposed to be like one of the best tight ends to come out of college in I don't know how long. So I think because of his skill set, because of his ability, because he was out there shining so brightly, it kind of dimmed the light on Darnell Washington. But wherever he goes, I think first off, if you want to put emphasis on a run, he definitely should go to your team. So he's a guy that can really help, with run blocking and stuff like that. And I think that, he's a guy that can be in the league for a long time as long as he stays healthy. I already read that one. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to read a few more, and then we're going to go ahead and get up out of here, folks. Let's see. The greatest draft takes come after the fact. Go figure. Yeah, that's just how it works, man. It's because we have the luxury of seeing it actually play out, right? So at the time, like, we're all excited about that. Like, we're excited. Oh man, that's a good decision and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden it just, oh man, what happened, man? That's just the worst decision ever. It's probably because you have the luxury of seeing it play out. And Dalton, we didn't draft a quarterback while Breeze was here because they didn't want to hurt Drew's feelings. Well, I don't think it had anything to do with hurting Breeze's feelings, Barbara. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the New Orleans Saints felt like they just had ample time. Like, I think they understood that Drew Brees at the time, towards the tail end of his career, was kind of limited, at some of the things that he can actually do. I think that, he was limited. They knew he was limited, but he gave them the best option. And once again, I look at Sean Payton and, some of the practices. I mean, I'm willing to disqualify my thoughts and views of this if they can give me a better answer. But it just seemed like to me like he wasn't really enamored in trying to bring in a young quarterback. Every time the New Orleans Saints, in the offseason, they needed a quarterback as a backup, they always went after a veteran. They never really pulled the trigger on a quarterback. And it's probably had a lot to do with the fact that, Sean had to ask himself, like, do I feel like this guy could be the true successor to Drew Brees? And the answer to that was probably no. So they ended up prolonging the process, and they found themselves in this position right now. And hopefully Derek Carr can be the answer to that for at least a little while. But I don't think it had anything to do with hurting Drew's feelings. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they just felt like they had the right guy. And I just think that, they just kind of, just prolonged it a little bit too long. And back in 2017, when they could have got Mahomes, I just think that after that, they were just like, okay, we're just going to roll with Drew. So I don't think it had anything to do with it. I just think that maybe it was maybe they didn't want to go out here and pursue a quarterback. Maybe they didn't feel like, he wanted them to go through the motions. And maybe, what Drew was doing, maybe they just felt like, they still had something left. Because we have to take into account in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, like Drew Brees was in the MVP conversation, right? I mean, and then right after that Cowboy game, that's when you seen like Patrick Mahomes kind of pull away from the pack and win MVP. But Drew Brees was right there. Like Drew Brees was runner up for the MVP. So I guess when they saw that, they was like, well, I mean, the old man still has it. So maybe that had a lot to do with some of their decisions going forward. But things started to happen. 2019, injuries, 2020 injuries, and some unconventional things start to happen with Drew Brees. Let's see, TJ, you still got Manscaped endorsement. I'm going to shave you now. Well, yeah, I'm still got an endorsement deal with Manscaped. I still do, man. I haven't really been plugging it as much, but I mean, I still do, man. You can still use the promo code SOTS and save 20% off. I just haven't really been putting emphasis on that, man, between like joining the Belly Up Podcast Network and also just some of the outside things that I have been doing. But yeah, I mean, you still use the promo code. People still have been using that promo code, regardless to the fact that I haven't really been plugging it here on the channel. They still been using it. So much love to everybody that's done that. Sydney says, TJ, quick question. Do you think it's overrated drafting a quarterback to have him sit for years? It's like he turned out to be a bust. You waste more time. No, I just think that we live in a different world now. We live in a microwavable world where we want instant results, right? And it used to be back in the day, what Sydney is alluding to, where you draft yourself a quarterback and have him sit around 3 or 4 years. But the way that the game has evolved, teams normally try to get a coach that has like a certain philosophy, and be able to develop a guy more quickly. But I don't feel like it's a waste of a draft pick. I mean, if you want to be honest, I mean, Patrick Mahomes sat on the bench, right? Alex Smith was the starter. We didn't see Patrick Mahomes until the final game of the season in 2017. So to say that it's overrated, I would say that ain't true. You can also say the same thing about Lamar Jackson. Joe Flacco was the starting quarterback, and then the next year, Lamar Jackson took off. So to say that, drafting a guy in the first round and having him sit is overrated, I would say look at two of the best young quarterbacks in the entire league as of right now in Mahomes and Jackson. They both sat behind veteran quarterbacks until the next season it was their turn and they hit the ground running. So I don't think it's overrated. Sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it also gives those guys an opportunity to kind of take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and feel like the whole world is not on their shoulders, right? When you're a first round pick at quarterback, the fan base as well as the organization are looking at you to be the future of that franchise, to be the face of the franchise. And if you have yourself a seasoned veteran that can be able to alleviate some of that pressure off of you just for the time being and give you an opportunity to be everything that organization wants you to be, it's a plus. Because sometimes your organizations can be so bad that you get thrust into it and you kind of have to go through the motions, and it's kind of like ebbs and flows before you kind of find your niche. And sometimes if you're not built out of, I won't say that's the wrong choice of words. Sometimes if you're rushed into a situation, sometimes you may not live up to the hype right away, and depends on your fan base. It can kind of discourage you or discourage the organization based on the fans' response for them to like go further with you, or it may mess up your confidence a little bit, even though you might have all the confidence in the world. Defensive ends need strength, speed, burst, feet, and hands. I agree with that. Look at Justin Fields' situation. Exactly. I mean, look, if you don't have that guy that can be that bridge for you until you get there, sometimes it can affect you. So to me, I mean, you look at Justin Fields, I mean, the light started to, he played quite a bit his rookie season, right? Because they had Mitchell Trubisky, if I'm not mistaken. Did they? They had Trubisky or no. They had Andy Dalton. And we all know, well, I won't say we all know. I won't disrespect a guy like that. But look, we know that if you're trying to build a franchise, if you're trying to make it to the playoffs, Andy Dalton more than likely isn't the guy that is going to get you there, right? I mean, he can right the ship and keep it afloat for a couple of games, but not the guy that, if I need you to play 17 games of the season, he's not going to win you 10. He's not going to win you 11, right? Probably going to win you 5 or 6 or 7 like he did, for the most part, the Saints ended up last season. But if you have yourself a really good bridge quarterback and you can sit down and learn and get your legs under you and understand the playbook and you can play faster, then, that's a plus. That's a plus. I think we've grown accustomed to, thanks to some members of the mainstream media, to believe that if a guy isn't starting right away, then something is wrong with him and he's not good enough. And if you hear that enough, you'll start to believe that, even though it's not true. And finally, says age is a factor at quarterback too. Too many don't consider enough. Burrow and Pickett at 24 years old should be more pro-ready than quarterbacks like Field, who draft young at 21 or 22 and a half. There is some validity behind that. I do believe that. Some guys, they kind of went through the transfer portal, red shirt here, red shirt there, and they come into the league, they're a little bit older than some of these other guys. So maybe they're a little bit, like you say, pro ready. But sometimes, you get those guys that are young, that are 20, 21, and you see some upside, and they come and they hit the ground running, and there's nothing like prohibiting them from reaching their full potential. So I think it's just basically the makeup of the guy. If you look at like Joe Burrow, I think that Joe Burrow had a little bit of a cheat sheet, if you will, having a father as a coach, being able to go to Ohio State, being able to be in a pro-style offense, being able to be with Joe Brady, and with his offensive innovation and, offensive coordinator at LSU, they were able to develop him, and he was able to like kind of go through that, right? I mean, he had like Joe Burrow was not a couple of years ago the same Joe Burrow we seen the year they won the national championship and in 2019 and what he is right now. It took a lot of, like the gospel people that's in the Baptist church say, many dangers, toils, and snares to get to where he is. So, it takes some development. And sometimes guys, once again, hit the ground running at a young age. And sometimes it takes those guys a few years to get it together. But I also think it has a lot to do with the mental makeup, the right situation, the right scheme, and, what's in between the ears. All right, but I want to say thank you all for checking out the State of the Saints podcast. Once again, I'll go ahead and recap what we talked about. We're talking about the first round on this episode. This is one of an 8-part series. We're going to be talking about every single New Orleans Saints draft pick. This is part number 1. Part number 2, we're going to be talking about round number 2 on the next episode, unless like something significant happens with the New Orleans Saints. But this is basically how the podcast is going to be going for the foreseeable future. We're going to be breaking down all 8 of the New Orleans Saints picks. If they move up, are they going to move down? Are they going to lose the pick? How do we feel about it? What would be the best situation for the New Orleans Saints in each round? So keep it locked right here to the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. We got previous episodes for you available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor FM. Also, you can check out the State of the Saints podcast on Facebook.com. Search the State of the Saints podcast. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, hopefully you enjoyed it. And I ask that you hit the subscribe button. And if you're new, you already know what to do. Go ahead and hit that. Well, if you're not new, go ahead and hit that like button. Let everybody know that you enjoy the State of the Saints podcast. And if you want to interact with me outside of the show, you can hit me up on Twitter at TJAY Jones 8, and also you can check out Belly Up Podcast Network, the home of the State of the Saints podcast. Make sure you check out the Belly Up Sports Podcast. Got a lot of podcasters out there that cover different teams, also cover different sports. I mean, if you're into boxing, if you're into UFC, MMA, what have you, there is a podcast for you. Those brothers work extremely hard. Those sisters work really hard getting quality content out there for everybody to enjoy. So make sure you check out the Belly Up Sports Podcast. Go ahead and follow them on Twitter and tell them what you think, man. Really do appreciate you all. Have a good morning, noon, night, whenever you're checking out this podcast. And like always, all I got to say is, who that? Hi, I'm TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And I ask that you like, share, and comment on this video. Thanks for watching. All I gotta say is, who that?